Thank you so much, Catherine and GBC, for hosting Elizabeth and myself. We are representing half of our collaborative team. And this session is called Do This, Not That, Request for Proposal. So I'm really looking forward to, in 1 hour, providing you with some of the pain points and patterns that we have and some of the opportunities we all have as a collective that engage with RFPs, to creating maybe the first set of best practices in this new time. So my name is Brenda Rea Moreno. I use she, ella pronouns, and I'm the founder and lead catalyst of Invisible Paradigms, where we facilitate transformative spaces for white allies and majority white organizations. I'll introduce one of our counterparts, Nadia Ali. She, her pronouns. She's the founder and CEO of Idea Labs, and they're committed to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. I'll pass it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Brenda. So I'm Elizabeth Franz, and I'm the principal mediator and founder at Humans Mediate, where we provide support for your challenging conversations, conflict, and collaborations. And I'll also introduce Sydney Jackson Cloxton, who was a big part of organizing this event today, and she's the owner and training specialist at Citrine Unlimited. She's a trainer, speaker, coach, and published author, and I'm so grateful for her time with me and also her advocacy for small businesses through Rocky Mountain Microfinance and organizations like this.
Absolutely. So a little bit more about this group and why we've come together to go from like idea and pain point all the way to a sort of a product and practices that we are excited to share with you all. So we got together just as peers. We're all women of color who are businesses and lead and facilitate transformative opportunities for a variety of people in our community. And back in 2022, July 27th, we found the date today. We were coming together as just peer huddles to commiserate, to cross-pollinate strategies, to honestly vent and support one another around like common frustration and pain points of just running a business. And I think there's many of us here in the summit who are showing up because we're wanting to level up and support this community of businesses. We started to notice, though, that there was this big rise in something called requests for proposals, or RFPs. Everyone that we knew had either horror stories, success stories, or frustrations or questions, or stress or excitement around this process. And it started with me and Elizabeth talking, cross-pollinating. Then we invited Nadia in, and then we invited Sydney. And together, over the course of a year, we started to map and identify common symptoms of a process that wasn't working very well. And so in our conversation today, we'll show what some of those are. And the hope is to give you, if you are dependent on RFPs to find the consultant of your dreams, I'm hoping that you will take away some of the best practices that we've developed. And if you are someone that, doesn't depend on RFPs, hopefully you can still take some takeaways to creating a win-win relationship between you and your prospective consultant. And so this was sort of, for many businesses of color, this is sort of one of the mottos about why we reunite in community and support. If you want to go fast, you go alone. Individualism and entrepreneurship happens. Isolation happens. This is why we're so excited to be a part of Good Business Colorado, where they have community. And we know that if we want to go far, we go together. So it's not just the four of us coming in and presenting this, or the two of us, but behind us, we have peers who are providing this resource to be able to exist. And we also have started to make conversations happen on LinkedIn, Consultants for Good, and now in Good Business Colorado. At the end of the session, you'll be getting our guide with tips included on how you can take RFPs to be for the good, for the greater good, and maybe identify ways that you can start to amend that process. So first, we want to ask you, and this is the moment to bring out your phone, and on the chat, Elizabeth will drop the link as well. But we want to ask you, from your perspective, what is the most challenging aspect of the RFP process when searching for a consultant? So if you go to slido.com, put in the code that you see on the screen, or copy and paste the code that's now in the chat, or you can take out your phone and scan the QR code. This is a live feed, and we just want to know from you all, out of these four, what is the most challenging? our list when we started to collaborate was probably 15. So to narrow it down to 4 and hear from you is something that we're really excited to take this time and vote on a session. Deciphering and evaluating different approaches and strategies proposed by consultants. One of the most challenging. Yeah, you might be coming through the other end of receiving all these proposals and being stuck and overwhelmed with, whoa, this room for the sector that we wanted help on is much bigger than I thought. There's a lot more, there's so many more approaches than I thought. So there's a part of like educating that can be overwhelming when it's happening simultaneously with identifying and recruiting your one consultant. Runner up is the second most challenging, is handling the coordination and communication between various internal stakeholders involved in the RFP process. Yeah, the second one might be related to sort of confronting that the RFP process is a project on its own. It's not just looking for your consultant, but finding them. The space between what you write in your RFP and when you meet someone is a project to manage on its own, right? Communication and coordination are a big part of it. So we are with you on this. On our end, we are the consultants that you are seeking that shine brightest when you get the opportunity to talk with us, right? One of the greatest impacts in some of these pain points is that we share them too on our end of connecting with prospective organizations. We have also seen some of the impact that we have, and us sharing the impact with you is just to see that when we're coming together to create a win-win situation where you thrive and we thrive, there's certain things, certain symptoms of a poor process that impact us as well. Sometimes we come up with RFPs that ask for too much or too little. They might be asking for a restorative intervention process and a strategic board training, a vision and mission, and training and policy. You might be asking for a lot of different things. And as consultants, we know that each one of them are interconnected. So we understand that sometimes the ask goes from like, we know what we want, and then, oh, wait, this is so much bigger than we thought. Or it's too little. We might be on our end as consultants, it's not clear enough. We might be having to read between the lines and read your mind or follow up with more questions. One of the impacts that we have when it's either too wide or too vague is that we get ghosted. Or we might be providing you a proposal somewhere in between, and the impact on your end is that we might not be hearing you the way that you intended. Consultants are here, and understand that RFP is sort of like the first dossier, the first at a glance of your organization at this moment. So already consultants are looking at RFPs and diagnosing what may need to happen. What do we need to do? It's free labor just by looking at an RFP process and starting to conjure solutions that would be best. So being too big or too vague can have impacts on both of our relationships. The other impact that we see is that people tend to shop around. We've heard horror stories from our colleagues where they put in all their hard work into a proposal, but they never hear back, or they hear that the organization has taken their proposal and given it to someone else, or like taking components of their approach from consultant A and gone to the cheapest, most affordable consultant B and said, can you do what consultant A is doing, but for consultant B price? Understand that because we're first meeting you through this RFP process, we're doing research, we're scanning for things, we're scanning for questions. And when we provide you what we've known now about you and how we can be best, how we can start our first collaborative project, which is working with you, that our proposals are intellectual property. Few RFP proposals offer stipends or offer some sort of reimbursement for participating. Even few provide timelines about what the process is going to entail, beginning, middle, and end. So the same concern that you all have about, going back and saying, we don't have the right coordination to communicate the overwhelming volume of proposals, or we don't know how to discern this. What we're saying today is us too. And we want to make this better. We want to make this work. So how can we? The other part of it is that there might be an unclear process, like I just mentioned. I think in the past year have submitted over 7 RFPs and have never heard back from people. It's damaging on our end because it doesn't make me even more motivated to go to RFPs. And it's also damaging on the other side. It's like the overwhelm of volume and communication. We want to get to a pathway where we can clearly see each other and connect with each other. So these are some of the impacts that we are seeing. And again, some people may be shopping around, trying to get more for less. I've had interactions with RFPs where people ask for the work that we're doing, are really excited. Everyone's feeling like this could really be the moment of great success and impact. And then they start asking to take away the process. If you're looking, for instance, to remodel a kitchen and you want the kitchen of your dreams with all the coolest gadgets and you want to have the best, dreamiest cup of coffee and breakfast in the weekend, right? You're wanting tone, function, and aesthetic. And you start taking parts of that away, you're left with maybe a cardboard kitchen at the end, or a kitchen that has a somewhat functioning sink. Some of these processes need to be cohesive. And if you take one away from the other, the whole piece starts to fall apart. We don't want that. We want to be in relationship with the organizations that we want to help the most, to leverage our strengths, perspectives, and knowledge to ultimately serve a greater impact to the community or organization that you're a part of. So I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth to talk about the opportunities, from impact to what can we do, where are we now, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Brenda. So for those of you who just came in, Brenda and I, we are small business owners. We've been on the applying end of RFPs, requests for proposals, and ourselves and Sydney and Nadia, our cohort, we've been trying to resolve the tension in how requests for proposals aren't working for us or our clients. So I'm a mediator, and in my training, what we find in conflict theory, and anytime I'm dealing with people's, challenging conversations, conflict or challenges or our collaborations, is that the place we need to look at is our shared values. What's happened is we're getting kind of lost in the process and in the way it's always been done, and we forget the fundamentals of why we even write requests for proposals and what is so important to us. So the first thing, we're busy. We all want to get things done. We're all doing more than we probably can take on. And the whole point of hiring a consultant outside of our organization is to make things more efficient, right? It's more efficient to hire a professional who already has the expertise than to try to learn the expertise yourself or to try to muddle your way through it. So we all want that efficiency. And what happens in RFP is we're not getting that. And part of the reason is what Brenda talked about earlier, is we're not providing that information up front to consultants about what we really need, because we haven't actually spent time figuring out what exactly it is that we want. And so if you can't get your proposal written in 1 to 2 pages, you're not clear on it. And the same thing in terms of efficiency, you don't want every consultant applying sending you a 10-page document where we're guessing we're trying to cover all our bases. So we're all spending a lot more time on this process than we need to or want to. And a way to make it more efficient is to come around these shared values and say, hey, our time is valuable to all of us. That's why we want it to take less time. And having this loosey-goosey process where you can present a 20-page document or a 30-page document with all these requirements that we have to read, then you've got to read our responses, isn't working. So I always encourage people concretely to try to get it to 1 page. If you can't fit it on 1 page, okay, I'll give you 2, but then stop. And if it's more than that, you're not clear enough on what you're looking for. And same for me, I'm not clear enough on my proposal if I'm writing more than that. If we can keep what we send to each other to be more concise, we can be more efficient with our time. And then the second shared value is we all want to find a fit, right? As a consultant, I want to work for people that I like, and they want to work with people they like. We're on the same page here. And so making sure that when you're putting out request proposals or you're looking for consultants, that you know how would you describe that fit, and communicating that up front. Because then I can read that as a consultant and say, oh, I'm not a fit. right? Or, oh, I am, let me apply. And then when I'm applying, letting you know who I am so we can find that fit for each other. Shared values, shared vision, right? Those are important for finding the right fit. And then there are two logistics that we just cannot get around when it comes to requests or proposals. When we are collaborating together, we all want to have that high quality project outcome. So whatever we're trying to get done, we want it to be done well, right? And I love the phrase, you can either have it fast, cheap, or good. You can have two, but you can't have all three. And I think that's true. I have found in my own practice and RFPs that if you want it fast, it's not going to be as good. If you want it cheap, it's not going to be fast, right? You've got to figure out of those what's most important to you. So when we say high quality outcomes take time. They need to have someone who has the competency and can define clearly what good is. And then what is affordable. So that's my last piece, is that like we want to have a shared vision of what a high quality outcome will be. And then the logistics are, does it fit my budget and does it fit my timeline? So if you put out a request and I have no idea when you want to start and when you want to end, even if it's flexible, give a range, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that, right? And if I propose something to you and you have no idea how much time I need to do it, you can't plan for that. So when we come back to shared values, I want to just draw again our attention to that the reason we're doing this is because we all value that efficiency. We value having a high fit. And we all want to have a high quality outcome. And that comes down to how we communicate that, and we communicate it clearly. So Brenda and I are going to talk about how to set yourself up to do that in the next slides. And is it just meeting our basic requirements? Can I get it done in the time I needed to get done? And can I get it done in the budget that I have? So that's what we're going to talk more about in our method, but I want to just frame it as our model right now. We are starting from the beginning. So what we find and what I have found as a mediator is that people want to jump to solution, right? I have this problem. I need a consultant. Let me go find one. No, you have a problem. Let's sit with that problem. Let's look at it. Let's think through it. Let's work with my team first so that before I ever put it out in the world, before I ever go talk to a consultant and ask for their time, I know what it is that my problem is. And then again, defining the problem, not the solution, because the reason you're hiring a consultant is for them to help you with the solution, to help you find one. So all the process we're going to present in the rest of this presentation is day one, start here. And we took so much care and time to write it out. And we want to share it with you because we see so many people skip this step. And again, as a mediator looking at conflict, dealing with all people's challenges and difficult conversations, I can tell you that when you move slowly at the beginning and you take your time to understand the problem, understand what your needs are, it actually speeds you up in the long run. So in our desire to solve the problem, because uncomfortable and icky, we want to get out of here as soon as possible, we try to just jump at the solution. And that speeding up at the beginning will slow you down on the back end because you have to go back, refix things because you weren't on the right track. You've got to redo the whole thing. I'm telling you, it's going to feel weird. It's uncomfortable, but this is the way to ensure and set yourself up for that success. Because if you get through these 5 steps of clear that we're going to lay out for you, the rest of the process is going to be so much easier. So I'm going to pass it back to Brenda now. And we're going to start talking about our strategy.
Yes. So we have about 10 minutes at the end of the session to focus on any questions that you have. This can be as technical as like, okay, but how do you implement this? What do you not do? So we will show this slide twice for you, but right now, bring out this QR code or use it and keep it open for you because as we go through, feel free and put any questions in there. Okay. And Elizabeth's also going to put it in the chat. So this question and answer, remember, we'll get to it at the end, but we want to go ahead and show you what to do based on what not to do. So one of the first steps, we have created a guide that will clear. It's called Clear, and we're going to be showing you the steps in 5 ways to go through on the preventative side of finding your consultant. First, have a clear understanding of what you want. Taking the time to go through the problem and facing it and understanding where its edges are, what do we need, who's involved, what do we want to do, when do we need it by, all of these are really important. And the great step is to minimize it to less than 3 pages, less than 2 pages. Can you articulate what you want to happen, what kind of impact you want to have, and have a very clear understanding internally first. Who does it impact the most? Who's going to be managing this problem to be solved with a consultant, etc. So this is based on what we don't want to see. We want to stop some of what I'm going to list from happening. We want to stop from the too vague or too much information to be in line with the values of efficiency and high quality outcomes. We want people to stop sort of putting an RFP out just to solve all 3 problems. Choose one. This is interconnected work, and part of your RFP may in the process may be stopped by this part if you don't have a clear understanding, and that's okay. We want to prevent it rather than intervene a process that's going to be more painful for everyone. The second one is L, look at your budget and timeline. I have been a part of RFPs where it's $6,000 for something that ended up being more than a year. There were amendments for sure. There's things that you can always have to adjust, right? A good consultant will look at things in a preventative way, take time at the beginning so that there's less changes happening down the road of a project. But we don't know the future. So we're also trying to be fortune tellers and time travelers with you to make sure that we know all the paths and alternatives to adjust the course if we need to. So budgets can change, timelines can change, but these are 2 very important variables for your consultant to know whether we're going to remodel your kitchen with marble and state-of-the-art ventilation system, or if you're going to get something that we can get at Costco, because we can also get like membership points out of it, right? We're looking to know if we can serve you if we can meet you where you need to be met and deliver what needs to happen. If we don't have a budget, I might be putting in my best work but not getting any response. Or I might be putting in my best work and not aligning with you. So there's missed connections that happen when we don't have a budget or a timeline. And be frank, it might be that at this moment we have ranges, or at this moment we have stipends, or at this moment we'd like this to end at X point. Any information can help us identify our capacity and our opportunity to help you. So do be honest and transparent with your budget and your timeline. The last thing that I'll cover, and then I'll pass it to Elizabeth in this guide of clear, to make clearing the way for both of us to meet where we need to meet as consultant and organizer, is E, express expectations around roles and decision making. This is an explicit task for you to do internally. Who's going to be communicating and coordinating that volume of proposals? I know that in my work as in anti-oppression and D.E.I, most of my committed clients suddenly realize that the room is really loud and really crowded. So who is the 1 to 2 people that can manage coordination? Calendly is free, and you can create really easy strategies for yourself with tools that exist to make some of that easier. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but be sure to express expectations of what you want the consultant to do. Are you outsourcing all of your change to one individual or one organization to save yourself? That might be too much for anyone to be able to do. Are you expressing clear expectations around roles? Who ultimately is going to be the decision maker? Do you have the decision maker in your team who's designing the RFP, or do they exist separate? That separation can be inefficient in finalizing the consultants that you want. That decision maker may have a different opinion if they're separate from the process of finding it. How can you bring in the power and voice where it needs to be to create it? Are you creating criteria? Are you creating a list of like must-haves, wish to have in like a wish list. Whatever internal process will get you towards timeline, budget, expectations, roles, and decision making will only make our prospective relationship of working together shine brightest, because we have both done the work that we needed to do to be able to see each other and the impact that we want to have. I'll pass it over to Elizabeth, and just remember, if you have any questions or want to know our opinion, or want to ask the group a question, feel free to scan the QR code. Again, here's another opportunity, or you have it in the chat, and we'll answer these at the end. I'll pass it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Brenda. So now are we at A? A for activate your team's decision-making process. For some reason, we grow up and we think that if we just throw a group of adults together, they'll be able to make a decision. And that just doesn't happen, right? If I threw you in a room with your family and say, okay, decide what you're going to make for Thanksgiving dinner, it is not a clean, easy, enjoyable process. And we find that often there are people, the loudest in the room end up getting what they want, and the people who just don't want to fight agree to get along, right? And that's not what we want when you're having an RFP. So the first thing we want to talk about is you need to make and define what your fit is for the project. So how do you define a project fit, a consultant fit? One of the ways you can do that is to recognize that you have options. So use them. Use your options to figure out what your team wants, any stakeholder, anyone involved. And some of the ways that I've seen decision-making processes happen is they try to go for the full-on consensus. And I can tell you that's a lot harder to get than you think, all the way to just the loudest person in the room decides. So you have tools. Some of the tools that I recommend are ranked choice voting, where you get to see a priority and doing it anonymously. And another thing that I recommend is just recognizing what is going to make sense, what strategy is going to make sense for where you are. So if you need to act fast, if it's an emergency, that is when a single decision maker is awesome, right? But if you want something that's more collaborative, something that's going to impact the whole team, you're going to want to slow down and make sure you understand who needs to be a part of that decision. So that's my second point in terms of activating your decision-making process. Who needs to be a part of that decision? I recommend and encourage you to always include the people who are doing the work. Whoever is going to end up doing the work is the most important stakeholder. They're going to be the ones having to do it. Who is going to be impacted by that work should be there. But I also invite you to not, and Brenda's talked about this, not having too many cooks in the kitchen, right? If you're trying to get your entire organization to decide on something, that's going to be a lot harder than having the department who's going to be housing the consultant making the decision, right? The whole department is going to be harder and take longer than having the people who are working on that project making the decision. So first, know that you have options for how to make these decisions and use different options. 2, know who needs to be a part of it. Third thing, know what input you need. And if you need to incorporate it, how will you gather that information? So you need, the operations person who's going to be doing the work. You need the strategy person who's thinking of the big picture. Think about what input do you need and how are you going to get it? The 5th is know your criteria. So when we make the final decision, we need to be able to test that against our criteria. These were the things we wanted. Does our final decision match the criteria we came up with to begin with? And then, like I said, the last thing is just how will you pick from the options? So I got a little ahead of myself. How you choose, that's where I recommend ranked choice voting over loudest person in the room wins. I would also consider a decision-making process that might assign different weight to different people involved in the process. And the last question I recommend you asking is there somebody or some mechanism you need to have veto power? So I like giving my accountant veto power because they can tell me, you can't afford that. They definitely need veto power because we may all like it, but if we don't have the budget for it, it's a no, right? So those are some things to consider. Last thing I'll say about A is just make sure that when you make the decision, that you communicate that to all of your applicants. So one of the things that impacts people like me and Brenda, who are single shingle solopreneurs, is we'll put all this effort and time into an RFP, and we're competing with firms who have people full-time writing RFPs all the time and just cranking them out. When we don't hear back, that's what we mean by we're being ghosted. And that experience of investing so much time and effort to try to meet your needs, the least you can do is just say no. Just let us know that you're not the right fit. And that's all we need to hear. But leaving people on ice like that, that's where you're going to stop seeing a diversity of people applying to your RFPs, and you're going to get the same firms who have those full-time, staff writing RFPs and just cranking them out. So please do make sure that part of your decision process, part of activating that last piece is communicate that decision to all the applicants, because they are now stakeholders. They've invested time to communicate and give you solutions. We have R. So reflect, reiterate, refine. Again, this is about slowing down up front so that you speed up as you continue. So first reflect, give it room to breathe. Okay. We know the worst decisions we make are the impulsive ones, right? Write down your criteria, make your decision, sit with it. Take at least one work day to just think, is that the decision? Is that the right thing for us? Don't rush into it. You have plenty of time because you're doing this work up front. Second, reiterate. We want you to take the time to tweak and adjust. So take a second look at it. Think of the ways you do it differently and how those compare to what you have, and be willing to revisit things. And the last is refine. So this is where you update things, you finalize, you find room for improvements. My favorite refinement process is checking that what I've created aligns with my core values. So as a business, my business's core values are acceptance, consent, and collaboration. And anytime we are creating a project for ourselves or for outside consultants, when we've completed the process, we're looking at it and saying, is this accepting? Is this consensual? Is this collaborative? That's part of how we know it's a fit. And that's going to make it better when we go look for consultants. We're going to be clear on what's important to us. And we're going to make sure that whatever consultant we end up with is also aligned with our values because we went through this process.
Just all at a glance to be able to take them in. Here is the 5 sort of best practices that we want to establish. And one thing I'm looking at, Elizabeth, from the room is that there's quite a bit of a fellow consultants in the room. And so I really appreciate how each of us are sharing some frustration and pain points, but also support for one another on this. It's clear to me that this way of doing, we might have outgrown RFPs in the way that they are being managed right now. Our hope in providing this workshop with you all is that we can either, it might sound like an either or language, and it is, but you can amend your current RFP process with the best practices that we've provided for you here, or you can move away from it and focus on getting these steps in first, or doing alternatives to RFPs that aren't exhausting or extractive for this relationship. So you have them all here. We're also going to drop in the chat. This is only 5. The work that we have been doing in the past year is to show you the tips, some of how to implement them, or the nuances and more specific things that you should do for each one of those steps. They'll be placed in the chat by Elizabeth, so you can get the same document, but with more information about how to and when. This is the first conversation that we're having. And because of the conversations that are taking place here today on LinkedIn and Consultants for Good, I'm feeling pretty excited that there's a pivot coming around doing RFPs. So I'll pause here.
I'll add, Brenda, that, as consultants, I know you're like, why do I need to see this process for RFPs? Because we want our clients to know this. So sharing it with your clients, sharing it with potential clients. I'm fed up with applying for RFPs. So when one comes across my table, I just send them the same one pager I send everyone, and I add this to it and say, hey, if you want a specific budget and you want customization, that's something that is part of the service I'm providing you when you hire me. It's not something you get just because you asked. Like, that is inherently extractive. I'm not getting compensated for that. I don't know what's going to happen to that work. So sharing this document with people, sharing the document in the link that we sent you all that has the tips, with organizations and saying, hey, are you looking at consultants? Do you hire them? Hey, here's a maybe better way to do it. Here's a thought process. And again, our team took a year to put together this first step, and we're hoping to create more phases in the future. One thing that we did was we got to commiserate with each other and support each other and vent and heal from how difficult and how much pain and hurt this process caused all of us. And that was the first step. And our second step is to provide and teach people a better way forward. So as much as we want to reveal why RFPs don't work, we need to replace it with another way to do it. And this is where we start with Clear.
No, it's really exciting to be at a platform like Good Business Colorado, that it's growing its community every year, and its initiatives are more and more aligned with values and with its community. And so thank you again, GBC and the sponsors, for having us participate in this shift of culture around RFPs. I just want to share that the QR code for our MailerLite is also on screen. We have over 30 years of experience working with RFPs, managing entrepreneur platforms, working with each other, and doing, on top of that, doing the work that we do. So if the four of us can be any guide to the work that your organization wants to ultimately do with a consultant, there's ways to contact us. We want to affirm and guide your process so it's pain-free. And honestly, the other thing that you can do is reach out to your team through these steps. But also, if there's a trusted consultant that you've worked with, ask them, how was your RFP process? What do you think of RFPs? What would have made them easier for you? These are just guides, but you ultimately know your network best and have those trusted relationships that you can improve on. So thank you so much again. I will pause my share. So if there's any other conversations or questions that people would like to have, we'll stick around for those. Thank you so much.
I can hop in with a question if there's no one else asking. I think I sort of got the impression that RFPs, or the move to RFPs, was sort of designed to say, hey, look, we're opening this to anybody, not just the consulting companies we worked with last year, or Joe Schmo or friend. That's the same old, same old. This is a way to get more diverse consultants. And it sounds like that is not working. Is it better to think of it more as just like, if you're hiring, you'd have an interviewing process, or that you research consult? Like, I don't know. It just sounds like RFP that may just be broken. And what is a better mindset instead of just sticking with RFPs?
I think what I'm hearing is you're asking, like, hey, wasn't the point of this to open it up to more people? And I can say I was part of writing an RFP at a local government that I shall not be named. And the RFP was written by the people who currently had the contract. And they put requirements in there that only they could meet. So it sounds like, oh, we're opening it up. But in practice, it's really not. And the organizations that can afford to search through all these RFPs and apply to all of them without any guarantee of getting any return on it, those are a small group of firms who can do it without it hurting them. As a small business, the resources and time it takes up just ends up not being worth it, and we get cut out of the process anyway. But Brenda, I'm curious what you think about this too. Then Benita, I see your hand.
I think it is, in the best case scenario, with the best hope and intent, that is what many of these RFPs are launched from. My hope is that we get those diverse candidates that we've never thought about, that we extend this room from what we used to know to what it now has become, because industries are changing. And from my perspective in DEI, certainly that was a lot of the way that the work was funneled through my network of peers. And it's also the way that we value efficiency or urgency, or how we approach the work, that, again, in practice, if we are skipping over some steps, then we're going to get the intent might be one, and the gap between intent and impact has gotten greater. My hope, my perspective is that RFPs can still serve a function for certain entities, city, government, or larger corporations that do have those resources, like Elizabeth is saying. And if they were to opt in, because that's the only thing that they can do, I hope they take something from our conversation today and through our work, or opening a line of communication with their consultants to improve it, because the impact is that it can be exploitative. It can be not worth the effort, like some of the folks in the chat are saying, where you don't hear back at all. And as a small business, we're left way in the process without any source of income that's guaranteed. And we have to take into our own budget and quarterly planning what to do to make up for that loss, or to make up for that time lost. So appreciate that question, Catherine. And I see Benita also has a question, so I'll pass it over to you.
I guess my question is multi-part. One, in my experience, it seems like RFPs generally are issued by specific categories of business and specific industries. I think that you might see more RFPs if you live in that world, but like for me, and the size of my company, the RFPs that are coming out are for big brands looking for a big team to do the work. And I'm not saying that I'm not capable, but I don't know if honestly what I can deliver can compete with a team of 10 on salary and bringing in a bunch of other 1099s to support me. And so I just wonder if this conversation is, and this is in no way being said to belittle what you've shared here. It's been interesting, but it bodes the question of, is it that the RFP process has to change, or people have to understand if you're going to jump into the RFP process, this is what you have to expect.
I think what you're getting at, Benita, is that there's like a time and place for things. And so when I heard you say like, yeah, there are RFPs that are specific to like big federal projects or big corporations, I'm seeing RFPs from small $1 million nonprofits, because they're like, oh, that's the process, because
that's an industry
one they're aware of. Yeah.
Right.
But I think it's like saying to people, look, there's a time and place for an RFP, but that RFP also needs to be very clear about what it is they're looking for, so that I know if I'm a good fit, right? Because same with me, it's like, okay, I could lead a team if you have one, but I don't have a 10-person staff, on salary. Is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for a 10-person team on salary? Are you looking for a small, nimble firm that can build up if we get the project? And that's what's not clear, right? They just say, I want this, but it's like, okay, but what are your expectations? And also, is the RFP the right process for your organization, for your project? It might not be. You might want to think more of it, like Catherine's saying, as a job interview. But everyone's kind of like defaulting to RFPs because they see the feds doing it, they see these corporations doing it, and they're like, this is opening it up. It's like, it's not. It's the same players. If you want different players, it needs to be not so taxing on the small group, the small businesses, the small solopreneurs who are applying. You need to have maybe a different process, or be clear. Do I want a small business person, or do I want an established corporation with people on salary? And that's why we're saying start with clear, because you need to know that and communicate that before you waste our time or yours vetting us when we're not the right fit. And Brent, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this too.
Yeah, I think, again, from my perspective in DEI and anti-oppression, I was getting maybe like 3 RFPs a week in my inbox or forwarded. And I think it's true to what Elizabeth's saying, like suddenly even small businesses and organizations saw this perhaps appearing to be efficient or effective process. And then there aren't any best practices or standard expectations around this as well. And I think that's what causes some of this pain points on both of our ends when we enter something that seems to be promising, but may not be the process for us in this moment. Or how do we sort of bring it down to what our own capacity internally first, about what we can manage in volume and proposals. And I think regardless, even if if a large organization and a large institution with lots of money and influence and power does do RFPs effectively and efficiently, some of the things that we are seeing cut across in terms of harm, on like exploitation, meaning you give me your proposal for free and I can take that to be free advising or free strategy. There's ways, I think, even for those big players to incorporate better practices that are equitable or that are inclusive, so that we don't keep celebrating the big one champion player that gets a lot of the resources funneled instead of these other prominent, smaller, equally powerful organizations at any of these atmospheric levels of organizations that I think anyone can benefit from, just being mindful about how we manage relationships, expectations, and asks for help. These are ultimately, I need help. And that's a relationship based. Humans make up organizations, and we're messy, but we also know what's best and how we want relationships to be effective.
People do business with people. They don't do business with companies.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we brought it back to relationship, because that's the point, is like, if I'm starting a relationship with you and you want to exploit me at the beginning, that's not a really good foundation for us to continue working together. But if you start with clear communication, I can tell you've thought about it and you're being respectful of my person and my time by like clearly communicating what you want, our relationship is starting on a better foot, which will lead to a better outcome of the project or whatever you needed. But starting with give me stuff for free and I'm not even going to call you back, that's not a second date, right? That's a leave. Don't even stay for the first date, right? But we're being asked as consultants to sit through this horrible first date, never getting called back, and then told this is how it's always going to be. And what we're hoping with Clear is to start a conversation about it can be better. We can have a better conversation. We can have better communication, and that leads to better relationships and better outcomes.
Yeah. Feel free to connect with us. If our contact information is on the document that is available through this QR code, Elizabeth and I are also on WOVA, the conference platform that we have for today. But please do reach out, because I think all four of us are looking for connection, and that's what makes a lot of this work possible, is just going together, going further together, farther together. And then we're also here to just stay connected with you all about maybe going through your process as a small organization that is committed to DEI or committed to impact. How can the four of us help you just come through that? Guide you through the clear steps that you need in order to find the right consultant. So thank you so much for today. I'll pass it back to Elizabeth, and then we'll pass it to Catherine for any last remarks from our end, and then we can close.
Thanks, Brenda. And I'll just say, really do take this QR code. The link is in the chat. Download it, share it around. We really want people to start seeing that there is an alternative, and it starts with us sharing and our stories and sharing this resource. So thanks for having us. And Brenda, it was a pleasure doing this with you. We totally nailed it on time too. So go us. And Catherine, back to you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the analogy to like a kitchen renovation, and thinking about what if we were doing our kitchen renovation, we just posted to the internet, I want someone to remodel my kitchen. I'm accepting proposals. I mean, that sounds
It's terrifying.
crazy. And it does feel like that's kind of what's happened somehow out there. And it's sort of become like, oh, that's just what you do. And that isn't how we do it with kitchens, and probably shouldn't be how we do it with a lot of things. It's going to be great. Thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Bye, Anita.